out himself. Here's what he said: God, I thank you that I am not like other men. And then he lists people that aren't like him: robbers, evildoers, adulterers, or, God, for a real good example, even like this tax collector. Here's why I'm different. I fast twice a week. I give a tenth of all I get. That was his prayer. But the tax collector stood at a distance, verse 13 tells us. He doesn't presume to go so far into the temple, if you will. He stands at a distance. He wouldn't even look up to heaven. But he beats his chest and he says, God, have mercy on me. I know that I'm a sinner. Here's Jesus' conclusion. He says, I'm going to tell you what happened. I tell you that this man, the tax collector, rather than the Pharisee who's self-absorbed and self-assured, went home justified before God. The reason is, everyone who exalts himself, here's a promise, will be humbled. And he who humbles himself, here's another promise, will be exalted. Jonah's sin problem is rooted firmly in idolatry and ignorance. Technically, he's doing what God asked him to do. He's walked through Nineveh, he's warned of the judgment, and yet Jonah's still way off. And that's why I wanted to take a second look into chapter 4, because this is a pristine picture of most religious people today. Well, I don't want to go to hell, so I guess I'll just go out and check the behavioral boxes. God told me to do this, this, and this. I did it. Suffered for Jesus. Woe is me. But here at FCC, we're not focused on religion. We are specifically striving to be focused on the gospel. Outward obedience or behavior modification is not what God is after. Outward obedience doesn't mean that you've come to delight in God. Like the little boy who told his mom, I'm sitting down on the outside, but I'm still standing up on the inside. And that's because delight in God and a forgiving, loving, God-like heart cannot be produced by fear of another whale. God-centered delight is only produced by grace, which is why the gospel and learning to preach it to ourselves daily is so significant. Delighting in God, having a heart like God, becoming a new creation can't be produced in any length of time by fear. So the gospel reminds us instead that Jesus already saved us from the belly of the whale. In fact, he went into the belly of the whale for you, and he paid every ounce of our penalty because he knew from the beginning that I would never be able to pay it anyway. Fear cannot produce what grace does, which brings us right back to where we started this morning. God's not after obedience alone. He's after a new kind of obedience, a kind of obedience that finds its origins not in fear, not in obligation, not in habit, but in grace, in the gospel. One more question I want to answer while we're talking about the condition of our hearts, and then we'll pray. In my own life, and even in other people's life, I know this because you've come and asked me this specific question. This has been a pivotal question, a question that's plagued me at times, and I suspect has done the same to many of us. Here's the question: what do I do when I don't desire God? I want to delight in God. I want to feel the vibrancy that comes from heart transformation. And I'm not saying that I haven't given my life to Christ. I've given my heart to Jesus. I'm trusting him for salvation. I'm trying to glorify him. But if I'm honest,